With all the information getting released recently, and all the tweets from various people on Twitter, it's seeming like now more than ever we'll finally get Hytale released. So first, I should give you a brief background on the history of Hytale and where we are at this point. After all, the last you may have heard was that Riot shut down the developing studio of Hytale, Hypixel Studios, or you may have only seen the initial trailer that was posted way back in 2018, or you've been following along with me and all the other psychos out there, reading every single tweet from Simon, waiting for him to finally announce. Hytale was a block survival game announced by Hypixel Studios back in 2018. You may be wondering, wait, is that the same Hypixel that makes the super popular Minecraft server Hypixel? That's exactly right. They wanted to do more with the popular block game than they could do in Minecraft, so they set out to make their own block game. And in April of 2020, Hypixel Studios was acquired by Riot Games, who proceeded to be pretty hands-off in allowing Hypixel Studios to seek out their vision of what they want Hytale to be. The team later announced in 2022 that they were going to be completely remaking their entire engine that Hytale was built on. Originally being built on Java, the studio claimed switching to C++ would help the game reach a wider audience, perform better, and allow people to play with their friends much easier. After this announcement, though, development news slowed down to a halt, and frequent, beefy blog posts covering multiple topics changed to semi-annual to annual blog posts covering only launch pads. No, seriously, you should go back and look at that blog post, it's pretty sad. After years of waiting on news of a potential beta fans could participate in, it was announced in June of 2025 that Riot Games would be... Well then, why am I making this video? The game clearly isn't getting released if the studio is being shut down, right? Well, not quite. One of the original creators of Hypixel Studios, Simon, who left the company when sold to Riot Games, began to be quite active on Twitter when people began to plea for the game to not go out like this. And after lots of bullying, his words not mine, from fans begging him to do something about the game being cancelled, Simon announced on Twitter that he would attempt to purchase the rights to the game back from Riot and release the game from the original engine that was being worked on. And after many tweets giving cryptic updates on how discussions with Riot were going, it seems that Hytale was about 99.67% chance of actually reaching our hands. Once again, his words, not mine. While people like to compare Hytale to Minecraft, after all, the original creators have one of the biggest Minecraft servers out there, I would argue that the game is much more like a 3D version of Terraria. After going back and reading some old blog posts, I figured it might be nice to paint a picture of what this game might look like. So here it goes. Hytale's world is referred to as Orbus. Instead of being your typical procedurally generated world, the team describes the world of Orbus as being divided into distinct zones. Each zone can have a range of different biomes, but there are specific things that only appear in that zone. There are a total of 6 announced zones, 4 of them being described in detail in the blog posts. Zone 1 is described as your typical wild forest wilderness, containing a lot of your typical woodland creatures, from bears to deer to ducks and rabbits, and sparrows and spiders. There are a plethora of familiar animals you may encounter in this zone. This zone is also inhabited by the friendly tree folk known as Quebecs. Let me read you a little description of what exactly the Quebecs are, directly from a blog post. First, let's get to know some of Hytale's friendlier inhabitants, Quebecs, who will become some of your earliest allies. Let's take a look at an example of a Quebecs at home. The screenshot below shows several aspects of the Quebec block set, as well as the various stages of the Quebec life cycle, from sprouting seedlings to autumnal elders. This life cycle is an important part of the story of the Quebecs. As they age, they grow slower and slower until they stop moving completely, releasing a burst of energy and becoming much more like the trees they resemble. When an elderly Quebec adopts this new form, Their seeds fall to the ground and form the basis of the next generation. Young Quebecs never get to meet their parents. Instead, they learn about their history from tree singers. These are elders who tend to these young seedlings as they take their first steps into the world. This isn't just a story you'll read about, it's an important part of how Quebecs operate in-game. In Zone 1, the Quebecs are opposed by the hostile Chorks. Once again, I'll read a description of the Chorks from another blog post. Chorks make for formidable enemies and come in many shapes and sizes. Hytale's NPCs are modular, and this means that we can create lots of variations in the same basic creature. In the concept art above, you can see several different Chork classes, from eagle-eyed sentries to powerful chieftains. Each of these Chork types has a different pattern of behavior, and this is reflected in the way they look and act in-game. When you rush into battle against a band of Chorks, you'll want to pay attention to all the different types of foe you're facing. We're using Chorks as an example here, but lots of Hytale's NPC factions work this way. There are lots of different subtypes to discover, and with in-game scripting and the Hytale model maker, you will be able to create or customize your own NPC variations too. There are several more friendly and hostile faction types throughout the land of Orbus. We've got Farons, which are kind of fox folk, Outlanders, which are a human race, Scarix, which are kind of these bug-like creatures, Goblins, a species that's referred to in blog posts as the Void, which we don't really know much about, and a sloth folk species referred to in some blog posts as Slothians or Slothians. And these are just the ones that they've shown us. Zone 2 is where you'll find dry and hot landscapes, whether it be endless deserts or vast savannas. The Faron occupy this zone, although not much has been mentioned about how this species will interact with the world. Scarix also find their home in Zone 2, building their nests into the rockwork of the different deserts and biomes of this area. Zone 3 is full of a wintry atmosphere, from wintry birds to woolly rams and yetis. This is quite a cold region of the world to be in. In blog posts, they explain that each zone is meant to embody a different element in Orbus, Zone 3's specifically being water. So it's not just icy tundras, but also winding rivers as well. This zone is home to the Outlanders, which is a human faction that has well-fortified bases. They go on to mention in certain blog posts that the Outlanders fortify their bases for specific reasons. Those reasons we're not aware of at the moment, but they say that we'll be able to find out when we actually play the game. Not much is mentioned of what all is in Zone 4, other than concept art for all the zones showing a fiery lava-filled wasteland, but one of the blog posts does describe that the caves of Zone 4 will be an underground jungle, and we see several examples of this in different concept art and images of gameplay. These underground jungles seem to contain bioluminescent dinosaurs, as well as the Slothians. Obviously, I said there are 6 zones, so there are 2 more zones that they haven't really detailed much about or haven't even been shown in blog posts, but if each element is to have its own zone, we could take a guess of what these other zones might look like. So, looking at this concept art image of the different elements of Orbus, it can be assumed that Zone 1 would be Earth, Zone 2 most likely would be Wind, Zone 3 would be Water, Zone 4 would be Fire. The 2 remaining elements would be then Lightning and Void. I would assume probably Void would be Zone 6, since that would be the hardest. And the Void are referred to as an enemy faction that's led by Varen, which, if you've seen the concept art, seems to be the main big bad of the game. Not much is mentioned, though, about what the Void or Varen are up to, but they seem to be the main antagonist of the storyline of Hytale. The world of Orbus has much more interaction with the player than your typical block survival game. Factions can assist the player. We've seen images of Quebecs assisting in farming. Mobs can interact with dropped items and will react to environmental changes. They've shown examples of Trorks reacting to the rain and finding cover, of fenwalkers, which are some swamp monsters, not liking being around fire, so running away when a player has a torch, mice eating cheese dropped on the ground, fenstalkers picking up dropped meat and eating it. Chickens also apparently will peck at you when stealing their eggs, unless you've built them a coop and have built a relationship with those chickens. Bears will begin to run when they become badly injured, and saber-toothed tigers will hunt down antelope. And those are just a few of the examples that they've even mentioned in the blog posts, so I'm sure there's plenty more out there that they haven't even described. There also seems to be a greater presence of magical items and weapons that can only be found out in the wild and cannot be crafted. Also, weapons greatly vary the way that combat works. Whether you're using an axe, might change how your combat works between using a sword. If you're using a hammer, that'll be different than using daggers, that sort of thing. They also go to describe how dungeons will work in this game. Typically, you may stumble upon dungeons which have several different rooms throughout them, procedurally generated to make different varying dungeons. And at the end of these dungeons will typically lead to one main big boss room or one main final room. Some of these dungeons even will have specific portals that will take you to the boss room. They describe those portals in detail in a blog post. Above, you can see a concept art for a specific kind of prefab, the entrance to a portal dungeon. When you meet the criteria necessary to unlock one, you'll enter a hand-designed encounter with its own rules and terrain. You will be limited in what blocks you can break within these portal dungeons, challenging you to overcome obstacles using your other skills. Depending on where you find them, the portal entrances can take several different forms. What you find on the other side will vary massively. And here's a glimpse at an early portal dungeon, the Temple of Gaia, along with one of its component parts, the Garden of Elements. There also seems to be a much higher detail in building blocks, and decorative blocks, and even specific furniture sets that are unique to each zone and unique to each different enemy faction or friendly faction species. For example, the furniture that Quebecs use will be different than what Outlanders use. I haven't even gotten to the best part. If there's something you wish that was in the game that isn't yet, they're looking to have easy-to-use mod-making tools and an in-engine model maker so you can develop and add whatever you want. And the way their servers will work, when someone joins a server with mods, so let's say you created a server and you found a mod you really like, and you want your friends to join it, and you've added those mods to the server, and those mods were made with their in-engine mod-making tools and using the in-engine model maker, then their client will automatically download the resources needed to run the mods on that server. They've decided to go with this because this comes from their years of experience creating servers in Minecraft, and they want to make sure that joining a server is as seamless as possible. And all of this stuff that I've described is great, but we're still waiting on the official announcement from Simon that he has bought the game back from Riot. He has also mentioned he wants to get the game into early access as quickly as possible, which means he may have to cut some of the features from the first release version in order to increase performance and make sure the game's actually playable. Depending on what has to be cut, some of what I may have described may not be in the initial release, but it's still part of the original team's vision to get to a point where all of this is part of the actual game. One of the features we know won't make it to release are the minigame servers Hypixel has long been known for. They've shown lots of examples of minigames in Hytale, including in the original reveal trailer, but we'll have to wait for them to be fleshed out before they're in a playable version of the game. Let me know what you think will make the cut of the first version of the game, or what you'd like to see added. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe, as I'll be looking to cover more Hytale content in the future, as we await the great news that the game has returned. My name is Chimkin Fingers, and I'll see you in the next one.